Hi guys, Claudia Bullen here, and today's video is sort of mental health. I kind of have a question for you guys actually, and I wanted to talk about my experiences with like my mental health issues and my BPD. I wanted to know how many of you guys get obsessions with things which are related to your mental health, and this is something I look up quite a lot and I've done quite a lot of research into, and I personally find really interesting because all the way through my life, I can sort of categorise my life into sort of these big, overwhelming obsessions with things. Like for me, it's usually fandom stuff, TV shows, or perhaps like parts of history. At one point it was Pre-Raphaelite art. Thank you, John William Waterhouse, who technically isn't a Pre-Raphaelite, he's called the modern Pre-Raphaelite. But my life can be really like seriously summed up into those phases of being obsessed with things. When I was a little bit younger, before I had like a diagnosis or anything, and when I was still kind of trying to understand myself and my family were trying to sort things out as well, I remember there was talk about whether I could maybe be on the autism spectrum because of the special interest element of that a lot of autistic people have. I should say I don't have autism, but that was just something that, you know, came up with regard specifically to the obsession thing. But I think this is a thing that people with mental illness can get like quite often. I think this is more widespread than we might think, because for me, you might know that I get really into fandoms and I get very emotionally invested. Now, I have BPD, so I find emotions really hard to regulate. That's like the definition of BPD, really. I find it really hard to regulate those. And so I find emotions hard, and I find life hard, like not trying to sound like a drama queen, but you know, a sort of a thing that would happen in someone's life that would cause a regular person to just be like, oh okay, that's a shame, can cause someone with BPD to go absolutely full on suicidal, like out of nowhere. And in the same way, you can suddenly, like, a good thing happens and suddenly you're on top of the world. So it's hard to deal with that, it's really hard. And I find a way that I deal with it is by getting obsessed with things, so getting really into fandom. So at the moment I'm really involved in the Emmerdale fandom, so that probably sounds so weird to people who don't follow me on Tumblr. Emmerdale is like a British soap set in Yorkshire, and it's my latest thing that I've sort of thrown myself into. I enjoy TV shows, and I want to be a writer for television when I'm older, like after I've graduated anyway, that's what I'd like to do. But that's my current thing, so you might have noticed my blog has turned almost entirely Emmerdale related right now. But this happens a lot with me with different fandoms. I consider myself a part of loads of fandoms, and you know I go through like Game of Thrones phases and Doctor Who phases and the whole lot. Something I've noticed is that I think doing a lot of like self-evaluation about this kind of thing, because I don't think it's something that a lot of my neurotypical friends, they don't do this so much, and they think it's kind of odd that I do this, and I can recognise that it's unusual, although online in places like Tumblr, like, it's quite common, and I think that's because there is a lot of people who suffer with mental illness do tend to go to sites like Tumblr because it's a good way to interact with people without having to sort of have that kind of social anxiety element. So I think that's why lots of people with anxiety sort of end up on online spaces like Tumblr. I really hate when people mock that as well. They're like, oh, mentally ill people on Tumblr. Like, sorry, like, where are mentally ill people supposed to go? Like, it's really nice that people have a space where they can feel comfortable and connect with people. I think that's great. But I often find that I get way too invested in things to the point where, like, it causes me physical upset when stuff like happens. Like, for example, like in Emmerdale, when the storyline goes badly, like I feel it really badly. I feel it a lot. And it's like, I know that's to do with my BPD, but I think that having mental illness, maybe when you find life really hard and, you know, your own life feels like a mess and it's just hard to deal with and you're taking it day by day, I think it can be really therapeutic and sometimes healthy, sometimes unhealthy. But I think that we sort of latch on to various fandoms or characters or things like that. And I see this all the time on Tumblr, and I see it get mocked, but I think this is actually a lot to do with mental illness, and it's something that I know that I do. When I'm feeling particularly low, you'll notice that my blog, it's like a theme. My blog suddenly turns entirely fandom related. So at the moment it's entirely Emmerdale related, because over the past couple of weeks I've been really struggling in my personal life, and it's an escape. Fandom is like escapism, isn't it, for people in their ordinary lives, and especially for people with mental illness or with trauma or something, it can feel so great to have that escape where you can just sort of relax and not think about yourself and invest in other people. But again, like sometimes it goes too far, and sometimes I feel like I do use it as a coping mechanism which isn't healthy for me, because it means I get overly invested in these things. And I think this might be something that maybe you guys have in common with me. I see this a lot. Like, it's my own fault, I think, for getting too invested in certain fandoms and certain subjects and feeling really passionately about them. But I kind of use it as a way to sort of exist in the world, because I struggle in my own life with my own emotions and I just feel hopeless, and I get suicidal, and mental illness is a huge part of my life, and it makes me struggle a lot, so I can be very down, and fandom provides an escape from that. And I think that's part of why people feel so attached to fandom, like in such a strong way, which isn't necessarily healthy, but I think that's what it's to do with, like, especially with me having BPD, feeling emotions really strongly. It's like, on the plus side, if you get into like a fandom or something, it's great because you can kind of live through it in a way, and it kind of lifts you, and you can sort of forget about your own life for a bit, and it's just like escapism. On the negative side, you start to rely too heavily on those outside things like fandom, films, and then they let you down. It genuinely can make you suicidal. Now, that sounds so ridiculous, but you would be surprised the amount of people that genuinely, and me as well actually, have become physically and mentally unwell because of something which has happened in a fandom. And it seems ridiculous, and when you look at it from the outside, it sort of is. But I really think this is linked to mental illness and linked to how people try and cope with their mental illness and the coping strategies that we employ. And I am trying to cope with my mental health issues, and I struggle a lot. I've just made a video about last night was a really bad night for me, and you can tell because I have Anne written on my wrist, which is what I tend to do when I'm really bad. So if you ever spot that in a video, I've just done another bad night, and that just gives me strength for some reason, because like Anne Boleyn, and I just think, right, come on girl, like you can do this. But I am trying to find other coping strategies, but one of the best ones I found is actually escaping into like fiction, literature, film, history, all that kind of thing. I feel like sometimes it's kind of sad, because I think about it and I think about the fact that my identity and my life is sort of filled up with the stories of other people rather than stories of my own. And I think that's kind of sad. I remember going into school when I was younger, and I always used to like dress up for school, like in like floral dresses, or I don't know, just whatever I felt like on the day. Like what I looked like mattered to me because I have BPD, and so I struggle with a sense of identity. So I often used to dress like characters I liked, and I still do that to this day. You still will find me buying clothes that, are not me whatsoever, but my favourite character has worn it, so I think, oh, okay, yeah, I'll wear that. Like, I'm just desperately latching on to my identity somehow. I'm trying to work on that, like, being myself and having my own identity, but I still find that really hard. But I remember my teacher saying to me, this is like my favourite teacher ever, she's brilliant, and she said to me one day, like, when will you come to school dressed as yourself? And I kind of thought, wow, like, that's such a good point, because I don't know what myself is. Like, I don't know what that is. So that's something I'm struggling with, like, finding identity when you have something like BPD or other mental illness potentially is so tough. I don't know. I don't know. Like, you'll notice that my name is Claudia Boleyn because I admire Anne Boleyn and what she stood for, and just that period of history fascinates me, and there are, like, so many reasons why I'm interested in that. But it's like I never have felt like a proper identity in myself, so I've sort of constructed one, in a way, based on what I admire and what I want to be and what will make me as good a person as I can be and what will make me contribute to the world, But it's really tough. But back to the fandom thing. Yeah, people make fun of, like, crazy fangirls all the time, but I've noticed more and more that it's not just young girls, not just girls in general, but, like, no, and also, like, there's nothing wrong with young girls being involved in fandom at all. Like, people get mocked for that, and I think that's silly, but I don't think that's what it is. I think that a lot of people use fandom as their escape from their lives, and so I think that's why there's that huge tie. So I would like to know if that's you. Like, do you do that? Because I'll hold my hands up and say I use fandom and TV shows as sort of an unhealthy coping mechanism, which then becomes not a coping mechanism when it goes wrong, because then I feel like my life is falling apart because I have constructed my own life around fictional things rather than my own actual hell of a life. So, oh my god, there's a fly. Like, that was dramatic. Like, when I say hell of a life, I know people have things so much worse. I'm not trying to say mine is the worst, but you'll know if you have like BPD or something. Like, it's really hard being that up and down all the time and being that suicidal and like feeling like you're constantly fighting it, and then sometimes you feel like you're going nowhere, and sometimes you feel like, oh, I can do this, and it's just such a mess, and it's really scary actually. It's like you're living with a lot of fear and uncertainty, which is, yeah, again, that's why I like latch onto fandom. I'm trying to disconnect slightly. I'm trying to not let my emotional state be dictated by fandom and that kind of thing, because I know it's irrational, but it's sort of how I cope. Do you use fandom to cope with mental health issues? Do you relate to this at all, or do you think it's ridiculous? Please let me know, especially if you're someone with BPD. Like, this applies to all mental illness, by the way, so if you have any mental illness under the sun, I'd love to hear what you think, but especially BPD, because I think this isn't spoken about enough with BPD, and especially because we can like struggle with identity and who we are and what sort of people we are. I think we often construct ourselves based around fiction and around those characters we admire, and I think it matters a lot to us. It feels like it becomes a part of our identity in a way, so when it goes wrong, it feels like we're falling apart. It's just, yeah, it's difficult. It's really difficult. But yeah, also that's why my blog has turned to Emmerdale right now, just in case you were wondering. I've lost so many followers, but the long-time followers of my blog over like the past 3 years will realise that when I'm going through like a bad mental health state, my blog just becomes entirely fandom for a few weeks, and then as I start to get better, it goes back to normal again. But yeah, I love you loads, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and I hope this made sense. I didn't plan it or anything, but yeah, I've been thinking about it. So I love you loads. I'll see you really soon. Bye-bye.